The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolfe, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hi, everyone, from Googlization Nation to everyone out there, to all our listeners on Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. We continue to hope you, your teams, and your families are safe and staying healthy. Just when you think the world couldn't get any crazier, the road to the new normal took a couple detours the last week. Seems to be calming down a little bit. And so I got a question. How do you like living in a VUCA world? For those who haven't been paying attention to me or Googlization Nation or Keith, VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I don't know a more perfect acronym to describe our world. What do you think, Keith?
I think you're a soothsayer?
Crystal
Right?
ball. I don't know.
But although you were talking about it, but somebody was talking about it before you were. Like, we're in it, my man. We're in it.
It is. I think oftentimes it's like uncertain. We talk about uncertainty every day.
Yeah, we have some weather fronts that are passing by the area here. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the uncertain, complex, and ambiguous seems to be words of the day. You hear about uncertainty every single day, and certainly our world gets more complex. But the volatility, sometimes I ease back on that because that seems a bit harsh, but it's probably the most appropriate word I can think of. Speaking of that, we had a last-minute change, so it's talking about uncertainty and complexity and volatility. We're going to be joined shortly by a good friend of our show and a return guest, Craig Fisher. Craig himself is going through some changes, but he was on the show. I looked it up. It's actually almost 6 months. Can you believe that, Keith? So
no, not at all.
It's literally a blur. Almost 6 months ago to the day. And we were talking about that time, where talent search was going. Craig was talking about where projects would replace jobs and skills would replace job titles and traditional employment relationships were going to be, disrupted. And, the way people hired and way people worked. Again, another soothsayer, on the list. Here we are, a couple of months later, and we're sitting not with 3.5% unemployment, but double-digit unemployment. Not 3.5 million people, not 3.5 million people looking for unemployed, but 40 million people looking for unemployment, or that were unemployed. So we're going to be talking about Craig. We'll be interested to see what his vision for the future is, and or did he have his sights not set on a post-pandemic and 40 million people, but is this how does this fit in the plan? And that's what we're sort of here about. So.
And it's interesting because I love Craig coming on the show because here's a guy who's at the front of the edge of where recruiting, innovation, and just the state of the business environment as it relates to the job market. Mm-hmm. And it's been completely turned upside down, and now with everything else going on, I mean, you got to wonder where the end of the tunnel is. What's at the end of the tunnel? Is it a cliff? Is it another train? Like crazy.
Yeah, crazy. It may be a cliff, and then it's a matter of if there is a cliff, then it's a matter of how do you land on that, and so there's probably going to be a lot more disruptions and a lot more cliffs, and we don't know if it's going to be a cliff, it's going to be a big ocean span. What's it look like? But we need to be prepared for that, and that's part of our hope. Hopefully, our message here is to help people anticipate that and be ready. And it's not like, if it's a cliff, we all die. No, you don't. I mean, what's the parachute? You need a parachute, or you need to figure out how to have a soft landing. The other thing I wanted to talk about, again, we're sort of living a for me anyway, Keith. You weren't even born when some of this stuff happened. The Geeks and the Geezers are coming out chronologically anyway. Last June, again, another thing, almost a year to this show, we spoke with Daniel Levine. Daniel Levine does Wiki Trends. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to a book I had on my bookshelf that was gathering dust. I remember it, but I don't think I opened it in probably 45 years. But it was called Future Shock. Yeah. And it was written in 1970. It was written by a futurist named Alvin Toffler. And he described, this is unbelievable. He described a psychological state of individuals and societies. I'm just reading this part. It's a quote. He described a psychological state of individuals and societies that has people disconnected and suffering from shattering stress and disorientation because there was too much change occurred in too short a period of time. How profound was that?
How profound is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what was interesting. He talked about it as he talked about future shock being the result of an accelerating pace of change, which we both been talking about it with so many guests and everything else. But the pace of change, the conversation sort of got disrupted by the pandemic. But the pandemic certainly, I don't think it changed much. It accelerated it. It for good or bad, it just accelerated that pace of change because all of a sudden, I think we talked about this in the last couple of shows. The best example I know is in December, 6 months ago, there were 10 million participants on a monthly basis using Zoom. Last month, or in April, and that's like an eternity ago, 5 weeks ago, there were 300 million people using it. A 300% increase. On that, or a 30% increase, I'm sorry, using that. So it's an incredible change. And I don't know what it is now because everybody, it's schools and businesses and family reunions. Everything's there. So, but it's pretty profound that 50 years ago, that was the subject of where everybody was. And, here we are. So fortunately, and here's what we do hope with our guests and our conversations, whether it's just you and me or we've had so many good guests on. There's a futurist by the name of Bob Johansen. He has the Institute for the Future. Super, super good guy. They do a lot of tremendous work. I'd encourage people to go up and look for Institute for the Future. But Bob Johansen talked about Vuca in the past, way before I was. I probably picked it up from him. But he talks about the solution is Vuca Prime. And maybe that's our parachute. Maybe that's the landing that people will have to get. And the Vuca Prime is having a vision for the future. Just because it's uncertain doesn't mean you can't have a vision. But it's vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. So there's a positive version of Vuca. It's vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. We can't create people's vision, but we can certainly help them understand, bring clarity to it, and hopefully make them more agile. So that sort of, that kind of fit in there. But as I was thinking about this, and I shared this with a couple of people earlier, and again, I know you weren't alive. Rebel probably wasn't alive. Who's our radio engineer, and we really appreciate her being, getting us on the air all the time. Craig was probably a kid. I happen to be in college, so I'm an old guy. 1970, May. Now we're in June, but let's say May 1970. Here were the events, and it was eerily similar. You talk about deja vu moments 50 years ago. In addition to future shock, which we described, of predicting that. In May 1970, Richard Nixon announced that we were going to war. We were already in Vietnam War, very unpopular, a lot of protests, but we were going to invade Cambodia. And when we invaded Cambodia, immediately there were student strikes. There were riots in every city. There were protests. There was political unrest because Nixon, like our current president, was not a very popular president. There was a mild recession, and there was also high unemployment. Now, I looked up the unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate reached the peak of 6%, which was high. So put that in perspective. I mean, this is definitely a worse time for unemployment. Our recession is certainly much, probably more approaching a depression rather than a mild recession. But the time was very similar. So, but I pulled some of these quotes just to see what was going on. And I didn't specifically look for the quote. But Richard Nixon's speechwriter, years later, wrote about the time 50 years ago. And he said, and he was referring to Washington, the city was an armed camp. The mobs were smashing windows, slashing tires, dragging parked cars in the intersections, throwing bed springs off overpasses in the traffic below. That's not, he called it, that's not a student protest, that's civil war. The language is just incredible. They talked about an insurrection. They talked about, again, using the military in the streets. So for everyone out there, I guess the moral of the story is we've lived through this before, and that doesn't mean we're going to live through it again uneventfully without change. But it's not the first time this has happened. And I happen to be, in second year of school. And there were universities that just shut down. I mean, they shut down now, but kids continued classes online. They just shut down. They gave everybody pass fail. Whatever the grades were at the time, they got them. I remember I had 2 finals canceled. They just said,
Wow.
Your grade will be whatever you had and I went to a super conservative college. There were 1,400 kids. I mean, we weren't in Berkeley, we weren't in, Harvard, MIT. I mean, but across the country, I mean, colleges, universities were shutting down because of the unrest. Also similar, and then I will go on because I know Craig finally was able to join us. May 9th, so just about a month ago, 50 years ago. May 9th, President Nixon showed up at the steps of the memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, to meet student dissidents. It was 4:15 in the morning. He did that. I sort of remember that. I don't remember all the facts, but I do remember it wasn't comfortable. But a historian wrote that Nixon treated them to a clumsy, condescending monologue, which he made public in an awkward attempt to display his benevolence. I don't want to go into politics, but that sounds eerily similar to what happened on Monday. Whether you're pro or con that, you got to admit that it was awkward, whether you support the president or don't support him. So we're really living in a deja vu moment. And for Keith, for someone like yourself and anybody who else is out there that says this is like the worst, this is the first time we've ever done that. And then there's old guys like me who say, it's scary, and we were there, and I don't remember all those points. I mean, I wasn't a certainly big protester at the time. I sympathized, I empathized with them, but I didn't necessarily go to Washington for good or bad reason. Didn't do that, but we'll get through this. So we're excited to have Craig join us too for some perspective. Before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors, Xor.ai, XOR.ai, and Success Performance Solutions for helping us be here. We are live today. So if you do have a question or something to put it in the chat, you go to w4cy.com and put a question or comment in the chat. I saw a couple things coming in already. You can also, if you have something to say, you want to get on the air, 561-623-9429. You can also, the replays will be up on Apple and Google and all the podcasts. But we also post them on LinkedIn, the links to them. So if you have comments, hopefully the conversation will continue up there. A few events that we want to get to. One is signing up for Googlization Nation. You get updates about this and webinars, Googlizationnation.com. We had last week, I don't know if Keith, you were able to do it live or you got the replay, but have my first of a 4-month series that we're talking about the future of employment. I've got Ed Gordon, who's a labor economist, He gave a great message. It's available now. You can go to bit.ly. You type in to your URL bit.ly, bit.ly/employment 2030. So it's bit.ly/employment 2030. The replay's up there. You can watch it for free. And then there's also a link in there for our the next version of that. We're going to be talking about future talent strategies, and that's on June 25th. Also got a white paper, our trust on culture of trust, or how to build trust in your organization. Also, we need that now, and that you can get it also bit.ly/trust white paper. So it's bit.ly/trust white paper, all one word. Keith, before we bring on Craig, anything? I know I've been doing a lot of talking there, but anything cooking?
I mean, you know what? It's so chaotic. It's so crazy. I mean, I've kind of dialed into I'm global right now, talking to people, business leaders, sales leaders, CEOs, about how they're planning to get their companies back running. And for most organizations, that means getting sales back into the pipeline and closing new clients. And that's been keeping me pretty busy. But in a nutshell, Ira, what I'm starting to recognize is conversations are coming full circle. Those really fun and engaging projects that were taking place 90 days ago, well, they got all put on hold, but some of them are now back. And so I'm taking a little bit of a macro step here and hoping that that's a reflection on better things to come sooner. But then again, we never know what kind of VUCA is going to come up. So I've been heads down learning a lot about the future work as it relates to business and revenue generation. So probably start talking more about that as the weeks go by. But right now, I think I'm pumped to have Craig join us once again. I know it was a little bit last minute. We had some VUCA take place. But Craig, are you out there, my man?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey, Craig. Hey, it's great to see you again. Hey, just a real quick introduction for everybody. Craig is the founder of TalentNet Media, and when we talked to him last time, it shows us our VUCA world. He was the head of marketing and employer brand at Ambiguous Global Solutions. So also, as the events happened in transition, and we're excited to have you, though. Craig, appreciate you coming on last minute. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, I'm in a unique role for me of kind of job search for the first time in 5+ years, and I'm not even sure I would call it job search, because in the background I'm always doing this consulting work, and I host the largest regional recruiting conference in the Southwest and Texas, and lots of other things. So I'm kind of an employer branding / recruitment marketing and talent attraction strategy guy in the world, with or without a formal employer. But I did lead the Ignite consulting team at Ambiguous for the last 5 years, and that included on-premise roles as head of employer brand at CA Technologies, and for the last year working with Toyota on a digital transformation project to help kind of transfer their EVP to something that made them a little more unique from the greater Toyota and Toyota Financial Services to hire tech people. So I am enjoying the sort of spreadsheet method of searching for a job right now, a little bit, and documenting my process, and I'm kind of having good fun with it.
So let's go there first. So the fact that you're going through that process, and it's the first time in 5 years, what are some of the most significant changes you've seen, other than you weren't doing it in a pandemic last time?
Well, okay, so it's funny. I'm constantly kind of in sales mode, hunting down my next sponsor for TalentNet or hunting down my next consulting customer, right? And so I'm kind of always looking for my next job, and that's kind of how I explain job seeking to everyone, because everybody in your organization is constantly looking for their next job, whether it's internally or externally. You know, the CEO is constantly on the lookout for what's happening next. Everybody is. And so from that aspect, not much has changed because I'm still hunting for gigs, basically. But in this kind of interesting Zoom world that we're in right now, you know, you don't go meet people for drinks and lunch, and you don't fly to go to job interviews and things like that. And interestingly, you know, a lot of employers have been in touch with me to interview for like head of talent brand or employer brand jobs. And I would have expected them to all want to do virtual video meetings. And so far, it's been mostly more phone calls. So that's something that I would have expected to be different and is not. Now, anyone can see me on video kind of all the time on LinkedIn and other places anyway, so maybe they don't have to see me.
So this is sort of I guess, well, I don't know if it's an academic question. Hopefully it's a practical question. Is the fact that they're doing these by phone, is it because they're behind the curve, or is that the curve?
No, I actually don't think so. So one of the things that, so I have kind of a one-sheeter for Craig, right? This is either Craig's, keynote speaker profile, or this is Craig's consultant profile to help your company attract talent better. Like, so I've got kind of these business one-sheeters that are like a resume, but they have my picture on them. And, most big organizations are told to remove that data so that there's no bias these days. Mm-hmm. And so I actually believe that video interviews are on the decline and have been for the last couple of years. So I think these companies are actually ahead of the curve with their, sort of bias training.
That's interesting because, we've had a couple guests on and you certainly, and Keith can probably talk a little bit better about this also. From an HR tech world, there's a video. I mean, everybody's pushing video interviews. I mean, I don't know how many companies that I work with on a regular basis, even in the assessment businesses, they're saying, oh, hey, we're giving our free video conferencing. We're going to throw that in until June 30th for free. So there's been this big push for it. But you're indicating that the long-term trend is moving away from that?
I'm not just indicating, I'm stating that it has been moving away for quite a while. Yeah. And I can tell you how, one of the ways I know this. So I see the companies that spend marketing dollars because they're in growth mode. And for a few years, they have not been video interview companies. Now, nothing against that. It may still become a trend again. But what you find is when you send a resume in with your picture on it, and this is me knowing applicant tracking systems because I do all this tech work in the industry, that gets removed now, right? So, and even with LinkedIn Recruiter, you can set it up so that you're basically just seeing profile data, if that's the way your company wants it to be, and not other stuff. So, I think. There's a lot of sourcing software that takes all that data out too. Even college degrees now can be removed to remove the bias.
Well, that's a whole other thing. I mean, because how many kids, how many people are going to be out there now that aren't going to complete a degree, or there's various ways that are going to happen. We talked about badges and certifications and different ways to demonstrate your proficiency, prior to this. So the traditional 4-year education, or it wasn't even 4 years anymore, but traditional college education was certainly on the verge of being disrupted. And then overnight, there's a lot of colleges that may not open again, or a lot of pathways that'll be completely online. So that traditional degree as a qualification to get in the door was accelerated as well.
Ira, it's a real good point, and I think there was already a push by most smart employers to move away from the traditional, top 10 Ivy League type schools for campus recruiting and move to state schools and broader types of programs to find good talent. I mean, definitely in the tech sector, and I think just in general as a best practice. And so, I think we're going to find that a lot of our best people don't necessarily have that totally formal education moving forward. There will be like lots of variations of what qualifies you as a professional.
And if, can that formal education and that formal path actually be a detriment almost, in today's world? Because, people learn skills and they had a proficiency in a particular approach that's been completely disrupted. And
I hear a lot of managers saying that they'd rather get somebody, and especially recruiting managers, right? To train a recruiter, you'd rather have somebody that you kind of train from scratch than already has these sort of built-in LinkedIn recruiter tendencies. Mm-hmm. And so definitely in our business, that's very true. I think, I've got a graduating senior who is, going off to college in the fall. The college has stated that they will have classes. They will allow people on campus as of August. Yep. And he's going to run cross country. And we actually had a live graduation here in Southlake, Texas at Dragon Stadium. We were all distanced and the kids were all distanced on the field. But 600 plus kids graduated in person last Friday night. And that was the first day such things were allowed in this state. And so it's a strange thing for these kids because that whole class was born during 9/11 and they're graduating during this, which is right. And what is this even, right? I mean, what's COVID? That's so yesterday. So there's really strange things going on for this class of 2020.
Yeah. Hey, so I hate to stop this because we're on a roll and we got so many things to talk about. I can keep having notes here, but we need to take a break. Let everybody know you're listening to the Geeks, Geezers and Googlization show. We got our guest, Craig Fisher from TalentNet Media. And we've been talking about the future of work, future of jobs, future of recruiting, future of tech. We've been sort of all over the place, but basically we're talking about our future, especially what it's going to be like to work and recruit and get jobs. We are going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai, that's XOR, and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. We'll be back in less than 2 minutes. Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolfe, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Welcome back to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolfe. I'm here with Keith Compagna, and our guest is Craig Fisher. We've been talking a lot about, we started with employer brand and just some of the trends and some of the things that we've seen shifted, what job search is going to look like, some things that have changed over the last few years because Craig's on a job search now. So we were comparing his opportunity now and his search and his approach to what it was. So if you have any questions, put them back in, put them in the chat on w4cy.com. And we'll see if we can give you some help. I know there's a question I do want to get to. Craig, I just want to follow up on one thing because I know Keith had a question as well. You talked about the video interviewing, and I can see where people, companies will not do a video interview up front, especially with the high awareness on implicit bias and conscious bias, and trying to extract all that and have a fairer process. But what about after, obviously once they've had an introduction, once you've had that phone conversation, do you see video interviewing also on the decline, or do you see that as, hey, I don't have to travel. We don't have to bring in somebody, we don't have to either pay somebody or somebody doesn't have to do it on their own, to travel a long distance to go for an interview. Is the trend that it's happening later in the process, or do you see it going away?
Yeah. So that is the trend, Ira, and I'll tell you what it is now. It's almost a commodity. Okay. I still see a lot of employers who use Skype, for instance, for these video interviews, which has no formal interview process around it, right? And no way to sort of attach to an ATS. And you have to get people's permission to record and things like that. So that's where the proper video interview technology is a really good player, because it does attach to ATS, and there are built-in HR processes there that can be really helpful if you care to track such things. Now, a lot of companies just don't track things very well. So whether they're a big or a small organization, that may or may not matter to them. And so I feel like a lot of the video interview companies have kind of been gobbled up into CRMs or, other technologies that kind of help that process along, built into an ATS or what have you. And so, yes, while that still does happen and will happen more because we aren't traveling for interviews right now, at some point you will jump on a video chat with probably a manager before you're hired. But it might not be such a formal process.
Interesting. Cool. Hey, Keith, I know you had a really interesting question that came up during the break, so I'll throw it to you.
Craig and I know each other for a couple of years now, and to the listening audience, Craig, if you're not familiar with what Craig's been doing out there, he sits on top of some very, very high-level companies in terms of being a consulting and an advisor on what used to be the most important element of business, and that would be recruitment and talent management. But now things are, the whole deck has been shuffled. And my curiosity, Craig, is what are you hearing from other people that are stakeholders in companies, big and small, since you've parted ways with Allegis? Now, knowing that you were at Allegis, that certainly allowed you to get inside of a lot of organizations, but I know you well enough to know that people are reaching out to you. Your network is what most people work their entire lives to have. So what is it that you're hearing from other executives as it relates to, maybe the short term, maybe 6 months, a year? What's out there?
Yeah, well, so a couple of things. I am still loosely attached to Allegis. I'm still, there's ongoing projects, things like that. And so I'm still sort of hearing what they're hearing. And at the same time, yes, I'm talking to all the HR vendors and tech companies right now, and all the service vendors as well. And it's interesting. Employer branding, which is what sort of my bailiwick has been for the last many years, in addition to other things, tech selection, et cetera. But employer branding is really top of mind right now, because when companies start asking people back how they treated their former employees that got furloughed or laid off, is going to be a really big player. And so not everyone really has a choice in how that perception is in the market. So I'd say the glass doors of the world are going to be very important moving forward. And the way people are asked to come back is also going to be a big player, because a lot of workers are saying, no, I'm gun shy here now because you laid everybody off, or you furloughed everyone, or you want people to come back to a physical office space. And it's going to be weird, because we're going to see a bounce back of the stock market, but employment is going to lag for at least 2 years. And, Ira, you and I have been through this several times, right? That's when staffing becomes kind of a bigger player, and full-time employees kind of go down for a little while, because companies will have found that they can do more with less, as well as not having the budget to hire back as many folks as they would have liked. So there are going to be really good people on the market that there aren't enough jobs for. And so the companies that really get that employer brand and attraction piece right are the ones that are going to win and going to have their pick of the litter.
I agree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was something that was posted yesterday. I put it up on LinkedIn. You might have seen it, Keith. Everybody could have seen it, but it was in the local Lehigh Valley economic development. It came from that, and Susan Larkin, I believe, from Allied. She said that, she had an interesting comment that despite the high unemployment, despite the layoffs, and despite everything else, is that the talent shortage really hasn't gone away. There's just a lot of people out there,
That's right.
that are looking. And that's a real big misconception. I've shared this story. I don't know if it was online. I've shared it with a lot of other people, but I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, with the client. And, I came up with this thing that recruitment's going to be like shoveling out of a blizzard with a teaspoon, or for you guys in the South, shoveling out of a flood with a teaspoon. And people sort of, well, yeah, but there's 40 million people that are unemployed looking. I said, yeah, where do you put your next ad up, your next job posting? And what they shared is that this company said, it's interesting you said that, because they used to post a job, and they were lucky if they got 25 to 50 responses on Indeed, because that was primarily what they were using, small business. And they said out of that, maybe there was one or two that were qualified. But the number that was stuck in their head was that 25. If they got 50, they felt lucky. And in 24 hours, they had 1,300 responses.
Right.
Because it was just easy. And he said, so my response was, I shut it down. What should I do? And that may direct them back to staffing. Maybe they need an ATS. Maybe they need a better process. They probably need all of the above. But yeah, it's definitely going to, it's definitely changing that in the environment. So just because there's 40 million people doesn't mean they're all qualified to do the jobs. And my response to that was that the skills that are needed to do the jobs are now all increased, because now everybody needs digital skills just to connect to the office, because there's very few businesses that'll be 100% back to full on-site at work employment, unless you're at you're in clinical health.
Yep.
That's right. That's so many things there to unpack, Ira.
No, I always do it.
you loaded up the shotgun. I'll tell you that. So one of the things is that Lou Adler will tell you all day long that we make it too easy to apply to jobs, right? So you've got Easy Apply on LinkedIn and Indeed, and other places. And you can upload your resume from your phone, and it will fill out most of the application for you, and things like that, right? So we make it too easy to apply, and people just apply, and we have these serial appliers. And so while, yes, we do get for small businesses 1,300 applications, and for large businesses 10,000 applications to a job, something like that, the software that we have available to us now, the AI and the stack ranking software, and assessments are what are going to be the big players moving forward, because we are going to have too many applicants, and we're going to have to cut it down to a reasonable list, and that list needs to be accurate and buy it, right? And so tech is going to be a big player. This is not going to be a market where we say, oh, throw more people at it, throw more recruiters at it because we've got so many applicants. It's going to be the other way around. So these recruiters are going to have better skills as well.
Yeah, Craig, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I've been talking about that for years. Even how assessments are, it's my life. I mean, it's how how they add objectivity to our gut reaction. However, even when somebody calls me and says, "Here, do you have how much are your test costs?" I mean, I don't know. I would say that 50% of my leads come in with that question. And it's like, what test? Who you want to test for? What do you want to test for? What role? But when I ask them this simple question, this isn't a simple question, but I'll narrow it down. At the end of 1 year, if this employee is sitting across from you, what is it that they would have to accomplish to say you're a great employee? And they can't do it.
No,
that's right.
They don't know what the criteria is. So even if you have AI, is somebody has to define what the criteria is for filtering people out. And to me, that's where companies are really going to struggle. And for those who at least moderately figured it out are going to be way ahead of the game. It's not going to be technology solves this. Technology is only going to help them filter better and faster, but they have to have good filters. I mean, am I wrong, or are you seeing that?
No.
I mean, you work with primarily enterprise. I work with small, medium-sized businesses, but are you seeing an improvement or a change in that?
Well, so you're not wrong at all. And in fact, you're more right than probably most people know, because there's no such thing as one company culture, okay? Even for a small business, every department has its own culture. Mm-hmm. And so you can't even define what's good for a company by the company, right? You really need to get more granular than that. So an assessment needs to be very job specific, team specific, manager specific, and really get into the psychometrics of what makes that team good. Why is that team valuable to the organization? And, what does somebody need to bring to the table in order to be a valuable player on that team? And so, I'm not a perfect fit for every job, and I'm a professional job seeker because I'm constantly selling stuff, right? So the assessments do work if you can get down to that level of granularity. But most companies kind of treat their culture as basically their values. And just because you've written some values somewhere on your career site doesn't mean you've nailed the essence of what makes a good employee there.
Don't even get me started, Craig Fisher. Don't even get me started about that. Right?
Yeah,
because
right.
How many companies actually have a sense of writing things out? I mean, it's almost like 6 months ago we could have been talking about this. Now the fit hit the shift, or I'm sorry, the shift hit the plan, right, Ira? And now they've got nothing and a bigger mess.
Yeah.
Well, what's a distributed? What's culture look like in a distributed workforce?
That's right. Yeah. So it's funny. I was on a call the other day with an engineer from VMware, and we got to this conversation. If you thought you had your culture nailed before, now you have to understand what is your remote culture. And that's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah. And, I've been working on this project with a buddy of mine, Chuck Coker. You might have seen some stuff out there, Craig. I've been posted on, we're putting the whole plan together, but talking a lot about trust. And, whatever your culture is, and I know some people defined it as a culture of trust, is that right now there's not a lot of trust, and you were addressing that earlier with companies saying, "Hey, we're starting to bring people back gradually," and employees, even long-term employees, are saying, "I'm not sure if I want to go back." I mean, for many reasons. So maybe they don't trust that it's safe yet, but sometimes they don't trust that what's the future going to look like. Are they bringing him back? Why are they bringing him back? And there was somebody that posted a comment here, and the different conversation about, that people are making more money on unemployment than they can by going back to work. The problem is eventually the unemployment money is going to work out and people are going to have to go back to work. But if people are considering that, I'm sure people would drop the unemployment if they were confident that they would still be employed 3 months from now. If I quit my employment now and then I lost all that benefit, then I'm going to go back on it. It's going to be at a different level because they won't have the benefit of the pandemic bonus and so forth. So yeah, a lot of moving parts for sure. Hey, we unfortunately are coming up toward the end. This was one of the fastest shows I could imagine. But that's what you do to us, Craig. So many things to talk about. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we should do this on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
6 months was even too long. How could people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me at craigfisher.info. You can find me at fishdogs.com. You can email me, craig@talentnetlive.com. Or craig@fishdogs.com. I'm really easy to find. I'm one of the most Googleable people you'll ever meet. And so that's why this podcast is so excellent for me.
Nice.
Yeah, all right. I appreciate that. Yeah. And any closing words or comments or pieces of advice for people? No.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, employers, as you start to look at what comes next, just understand that we don't know what the new normal is, and don't try to own that and solve it, because you just need to wait and see. Things are going to play out differently than we probably expect.
Yeah, Vuca, baby, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So,
Thanks,
hey,
Craig. And we're coming up at the end here. I'm gonna chime in here and try to remind everybody not to let perfection be the enemy of good. It's good enough to try. It's good enough to communicate. It's good enough to tell your employees, whoever is left, that you're trying to figure it out and you'll get back to them. Don't hesitate to try a little bit because you don't know the end game and you're not sure how it's going to look.
That's interesting because I'm actually, I don't know if you knew this, Keith, I'm actually got hired to develop an organizational change management course for a new graduate program. And they rolled the format down purely academic from that standpoint. And I had to question all the objectives. So, that they laid out. They talked about governance, and I go, what governance? I mean, it's like, it's sort of like the old thing, which, and we've all been long enough to know. It's like, hey, you need to think outside of the box. And the right question is what box? Right. Who said there was a box, and was it a square box or a rectangular box or a flat box or a big box, and people just assume that it's a box, and it's like you got to question everything, and in that world I love that. Don't let the perfection get in the way of doing something good. Yep. So we've again, Craig, appreciate it so much, especially coming on the fly. Great conversation. Good luck in your search, and whatever you're doing, we'll definitely be in touch for sure. Final words from you, Keith. What else? Or was that your final word?
Thank you. How about that? To all the people that are out there listening, definitely to Craig for pulling the audible here. And, keep listening, keep checking out the content. The future of work is wide open right now. So make your opportunity, seek out help, and don't be afraid to ask what's going on next.
And thanks for everybody today. I neglected, Missy had written a question earlier, and we didn't get to it. But if you want to continue to chat, Missy, contact either Keith or myself on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to do that. But she asked about, why do things keep happening over and over again? It's because we don't learn, or we just want to make mistakes. And I want to thank Alvin, who had, to my line about what's in the South, I said that it was, shoveling out of a flood with the teaspoon. He said, no, it's like in the South, it would be sucking out of a flood with a straw. So I will be sure to use that. We can't thank everybody enough for listening, being part of Geeks Geezers Googlization, and hopefully you'll take the opportunity to join Googlization Nation at googlizationnation.com. It's free, and you'll get updates about this and our webinars and podcasts and live streams and white papers and a whole bunch of other things. Thanks to Zor.ai, XOR.ai, and Success Performance Solution for being part of the show, making this possible. If you have comments or anything, please connect in between our shows with Keith and myself and Craig on LinkedIn. You can listen to any of our older shows and catch Craig's from December 18th. If you go to geeksgeezersgooglization.com, December 18th was the show, and we can talk about that. You can listen to all the shows also on Apple and Google and Spotify, iHeart, SoundCloud, Amazon, you name it, we're there. So until next week, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. This is Ira Wolfe and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.